Welcome to our deep dives this time. We're going to be looking at smart devices in Africa.
Oh,
We're looking at a report. It's called The Blueprint for Inclusive Adoption of Smart Devices in Africa. And it's a pretty big report. It's from Smart Africa,
mm-hmm.
LBC, and GIZ. It was published in May 2022.
Okay.
And it kind of tackles a really big question of how to empower people and boost economies through technology. And I thought this would be a really fascinating thing to look at, particularly because the African Union has this goal
Yeah.
of bringing every single African online by 2030.
Ambitious.
So that's kind of our mission in this deep dive. How could that even happen?
Well, and I think it's important to consider that when we talk about smartphones and tablets and PCs, we often think of them as, just gadgets. But in Africa, these devices are so much more than that. These are platforms for education, healthcare, business, pretty much every aspect of modern life.
That's a really good point. So it's not just getting people a device, it's giving them opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what does the digital landscape in Africa even look like right now?
Well, the picture is actually quite complex.
Yeah, okay.
Smartphone adoption rates are rising. We're looking at about 48% in sub-Saharan Africa, 54% in North Africa. But that growth isn't even across all regions.
Okay.
And when it comes to computers, only about 30.6% of African households have one.
Oh, wow.
So that's a huge gap compared to the global average.
Yeah.
And it tells us a lot about the digital divide that exists on the continent.
That's a big gap.
Yeah.
But you said the smartphone adoption, IS, rising?
Yeah.
What does that even mean for internet use then?
Well, here's a pretty mind-blowing statistic. Despite the lack of computers, mobile devices account for a whopping 67.7% of Africa's web traffic.
Wow.
So basically that means that anything that wants to reach an African audience, any app, any service, any website must be designed for mobile first.
Wow. That really changes how you think about internet access then, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about having the device, it's about what you can do with it. So of course there are challenges to even getting those devices into people's hands.
Of course. I mean, the biggest one is affordability. Smart devices are very expensive in Africa, and for lots of reasons.
Okay.
I mean, let's imagine you're trying to buy a new computer in a rural area. Well, you've got import duties, which add to the price right away. Then there's the logistical costs of shipping these often bulky items over long distances. And then on top of that, in some countries, an entry-level phone can cost over 120% of a person's monthly income.
Wow.
It's pretty shocking.
Yeah, you're right. That is shocking.
Yeah.
It makes you realize just how much cost is a barrier.
Yeah.
But you mentioned import duties. Aren't taxes just a way for governments to get revenue?
Well, yes, but it's not always that simple.
Okay.
High taxes on devices like these can actually backfire.
How so?
Well, think about it. If fewer people can actually afford to get online, that's going to slow down the entire economy.
Right.
Which means less growth and ultimately less revenue for the government in the long run.
It's like shooting yourself in the foot.
It really is.
So the blueprint really dives into this affordability problem. What are some of their solutions?
Well, they understand that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
You have to consider different income levels and needs. So for people with limited incomes, things like data bundles, loyalty programs, pre-installed apps are essential.
Okay.
It's about making those small but significant differences in cost and usability.
So it's about making it possible for them to even use the technology once they have it.
Exactly.
So what about people who could afford a small cost up front, but maybe not the full price of a device? What do they say about that?
Well, this is where asset financing comes in.
Asset financing.
Yeah. It's basically microloans specifically for things like smartphones.
Oh.
So think of it like a small loan that helps someone buy a device that they couldn't otherwise afford. It's actually been really successful in other markets.
Okay.
And the blueprint argues that it could be a real game changer in Africa.
That's really interesting. Microloans have been so impactful in other areas. It makes sense that that could work too. But what about people who can't afford any device? Even with financing,
Yeah.
what happens to them?
Well, the blueprint doesn't forget about them. They suggest public internet access points.
Okay.
So places like libraries or community centers where people can go to use computers and the internet for free.
Right.
And you can imagine the impact that could have, especially in rural communities where owning a personal device just might not be realistic for a while.
Yeah, like a safety net so that everyone can participate.
Exactly. It's about opportunity, not gadgets.
Yeah. And that's where I guess the role of the government comes in. The blueprint really goes deep into ideas like tax restructuring and things like that.
Yeah. Fiscal incentives.
Fiscal incentives. Could reducing taxes on devices actually boost government revenue?
Potentially. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah, so it's a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing.
It-
But even with lower prices and more access, there's that whole problem of counterfeit devices. How does the blueprint address that?
They're very clear about the harm that counterfeit devices cause. They might seem cheaper up front,
Right.
but they break easily, they have no warranty, and ultimately they hurt consumer trust.
Yeah.
And it creates this vicious cycle where people are afraid to invest in technology because they've been burned before.
Right. So it's not just about getting the devices out there.
No,
The blueprint seems to argue that it's also about more long-term solutions.
absolutely. They argue that Africa needs to move beyond just being a consumer of technology and become a producer.
So thinking bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And this isn't just an abstract idea. We're already seeing companies like Mara Phones and Rwanda Infinix in Egypt that are manufacturing devices locally.
Wow.
And the blueprint emphasizes that local manufacturing has the potential to create jobs, build skills, and potentially make devices more affordable over time.
That's really cool, taking control of your own destiny.
Ex-
But more devices also leads to another problem, waste.
Oh, yeah.
We already have tons of e-waste globally.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when millions more Africans have devices?
That's a huge concern. The blueprint actually points out that the take, make, dispose model just isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
They predict that Africa could generate 50 million metric tons of e-waste by 2050.
50 million.
Mind-boggling number.
That's just, wow. Okay, so what's the solution? Ban devices altogether?
No, not realistic.
Okay.
Instead, they propose a circular economy. So what if devices were actually designed to be repaired and recycled easily?
Yep.
Not only would this reduce waste, but it would also create new industries and job opportunities in Africa focused on repair, refurbishment, and recycling.
Turning a problem into an opportunity.
Exactly.
That's pretty clever. There's this one final idea in the blueprint that I'm struggling to wrap my head around, a single digital market. What is that?
This is where the blueprint gets really ambitious.
Okay.
Imagine a unified market for smart devices across the entire African continent.
Whoa. That's a kicky big.
It is.
So what would that actually look like?
Well, essentially, it's about breaking down the barriers that exist between the 54 different markets in Africa.
Okay.
So imagine harmonized regulations, streamlined trade, and even the free movement of skilled workers across borders.
So instead of all these separate smaller markets, it's one giant interconnected powerhouse.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Rising adoption rates, the digital divide, the challenges of affordability, counterfeit devices, the need to move beyond just being consumers of technology, and then all these solutions in the blueprint tackling affordability from multiple angles, promoting local manufacturing, embracing a circular economy, and this incredible vision of a single digital market. My brain is buzzing.
I know. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that the blueprint doesn't just present these ideas as a wish list. They actually weave them together into a cohesive strategy,
Cool.
showing how all of these different pieces can fit together to actually create a pathway for a more digitally inclusive and empowered Africa.
So we have the roadmap, but where are we headed? What's the destination? What does the blueprint envision as the end goal for all of this? I guess that's where we're going next.
Yeah, let's dive into that.
Okay.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
That 50 million metric tons of e-waste figure is still stuck in my head. But before we spiral into a tech dystopia, you mentioned that the blueprint has a roadmap for change. What does it envision as the end goal for all this?
Well, they paint a really inspiring picture of the future.
Okay.
Imagine a continent where reliable, high-speed internet is available everywhere, not just in the big cities.
No more digital deserts. Everyone's connected.
Exactly. And it's not just about being connected. It's about having the skills to use that connection.
Right.
Imagine widespread digital literacy where people of all ages, backgrounds, and income levels can truly harness the power of these devices.
So going beyond just passively consuming content,
Mm-hmm.
it's about creating, innovating, participating in the digital economy.
That's the key.
Yeah.
If we remove those barriers of affordability and digital literacy, we unleash this wave of potential. That young person in a rural village with a smartphone isn't just scrolling through social media. They're designing apps. They're launching businesses connecting with a global marketplace.
It's like leveling the playing field, giving everyone a chance.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that all leads to economic growth, job creation, a more prosperous future for everyone.
Absolutely.
That sounds amazing, but also like a huge undertaking. The blueprint also talks about local manufacturing and a single digital market.
Yeah,
How do those fit in?
they're essential.
Okay.
Imagine a continent that's not just using technology but building it. We already see companies like Mara Phones, but imagine Africa as a global hub for smart device manufacturing, attracting investment, creating jobs, building expertise.
Made in Africa for Africa by Africa.
Mm,
I love it.
yeah.
The single digital market is still a little hard for me to grasp. What does that even mean?
It's about breaking down those barriers that currently fragment Africa's digital landscape.
Okay.
Right now, you have 54 different countries with different regulations, trade policies, markets. The single digital market aims to unify all that.
So instead of 54 separate markets, you have one massive interconnected digital powerhouse.
Exactly.
Okay. And what are the implications of that?
Well, the implications are huge. You have more competition, which means lower prices for consumers.
Oh,
Easier access to talent and resources allows businesses to scale up faster. And a unified market gives you much more leverage on the global stage.
strength in numbers.
Exactly. Africa would have a stronger bargaining position when negotiating with big tech companies.
Okay.
More attractive investment opportunities, and a greater ability to shape the rules of the digital economy.
So it's not just about catching up.
Right.
It's about taking the lead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the blueprint sees Africa moving from a continent defined by its challenges to a continent leading the way in digital innovation and inclusivity.
That's the ultimate goal.
That is really cool. Okay, so we've got this really inspiring vision,
Yeah.
but what are some of the potential roadblocks? What could go wrong?
Well, nothing this ambitious is easy. First and foremost, it requires massive collaboration.
Okay.
We're talking governments, businesses, NGOs, individuals, all working together towards a common goal.
That's a lot of moving parts.
It is. You're going to have competing interests, different levels of commitment, and the challenge of coordinating efforts across such a vast and diverse continent.
So it's not just about the plan, it's about the execution.
Absolutely. And then there's the question of resources.
Right.
Achieving this vision requires huge investments in infrastructure, education, training.
Money makes the world go round.
It does. Securing funding, both from within Africa and from international partners, is going to be crucial. The blueprint actually suggests some really innovative financing models like public-private partnerships and even a dedicated Smart Africa investment fund.
We can't talk about funding without talking about big tech companies.
Mhm.
They obviously have a huge influence on the digital landscape.
Yeah.
How does the blueprint see their role in all this?
Well, they take a really nuanced approach.
Well-
On the one hand, they recognize the need to collaborate with these companies. They have the expertise, the resources, and the global reach that Africa needs.
So it's not about shutting them out.
No, not at
Yeah.
all. But at the same time, the blueprint is really clear about the need to create a level playing field.
Okay.
They call for fair competition, strong data privacy protections, and making sure that African governments and businesses have a voice when it comes to shaping the rules of the digital game.
So collaboration, but not at the expense of agency.
Exactly.
Okay. We've talked a lot about Africa, but what does this mean for the rest of the world? What happens if this actually works?
Well, the implications are huge. If Africa succeeds in building this digitally inclusive and empowered future, it could become a model for other developing regions.
Okay.
It would show that this kind of progress isn't just a dream, it's a tangible possibility. It could provide a roadmap for other countries looking to use technology for positive change.
So it's a win for Africa, but also a win for everyone.
Exactly. And on a more practical level, a digitally thriving Africa means new markets for global businesses. A surge in innovation and creativity, and a larger pool of talent contributing to solving the world's problems.
So this ripple effect spreads outward from the continent.
Yeah, and think about the potential for cultural exchange and understanding, too.
Right.
As more Africans come online, it creates connections, it breaks down stereotypes, and it helps to build a more vibrant global community.
Opening up new channels for communication.
Exactly, and in a world that often feels so divided, that's incredibly powerful. It's a reminder that technology, when used thoughtfully, can be a force for good, a tool for bringing people together.
That is a hopeful message. We've got this amazing vision. We've talked about the potential impact and some of the challenges, but how does it actually happen? What are the concrete steps?
That's the big question. The blueprint doesn't just stop at the vision. It lays out specific recommendations for implementation, and that's what we'll explore in part 3 of this deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone through this incredible landscape of smart devices in Africa, and we sort of imagine this future where those devices really are tools for empowerment and progress.
Yeah.
But now comes the really, really exciting part. figuring out how to make it actually happen.
Well, yeah, it's one thing to have a vision.
Right.
Turning it into reality that takes some serious action. That's where these recommendations for implementation from the blueprint come in.
That's what I love. We talk about these big ideas, but what are the concrete steps? What does the blueprint actually suggest that we do?
Well, the blueprint actually gets really specific,
Okay.
outlining strategies, key players, actionable steps across a whole range of different areas. It's like this detailed roadmap with clear directions for how to get to this digitally inclusive future.
So it's not just a theoretical document.
No.
Okay. So where do we even begin, though, with something this big?
Well, one of the core themes that you see throughout the blueprint is collaboration. They recognize that no single entity, not governments, not businesses, not NGOs, can achieve this alone.
So it's a team effort.
Yeah, everyone has to work together.
Okay.
The blueprint suggests creating what they call partnerships for smart device development.
Hmm.
Think of these as coalitions of stakeholders, bringing together governments, private companies, civil society organizations, and even individuals to work towards shared goals.
So a tech company and a government ministry and a local community group all sitting around a table figuring out how to make this happen.
Precisely. It's about bringing together different perspectives, expertise, and resources to create solutions that are actually tailored to the specific needs and challenges that people are facing.
I love that. Can you give me some examples of what these partnerships would actually look like in action?
Sure. Let's take affordability. We know that that's a huge barrier. The blueprint recommends a multi-pronged approach with strategies that range from those direct payment solutions like the data bundles that we talked about
Right.
to more systemic changes like tax restructuring or tackling that counterfeit device market.
So it's tackling the problem from all sides, short-term and long-term solutions.
Exactly. And these solutions require collaboration. So, for example, governments could work with mobile network operators to create more affordable data plans.
Cool.
Or they could partner with financial institutions to develop microloan programs specifically for device purchases.
So leveraging the existing structures and relationships to make these things happen.
Right. And it's not just about affordability. The blueprint also outlines some really specific actions to address the digital skills gap. They call for things like large-scale training programs, partnerships to develop educational content, and even using mobile platforms to deliver digital skills training to remote communities.
Meeting people where they are.
Exactly. And remember that ambition of local manufacturing.
Mhm.
Well, the blueprint outlines a plan for actually boosting Africa's device production capacity. They suggest things like establishing specialized economic zones, investing in skills training, and creating platforms to connect investors with African tech startups.
Building this whole ecosystem then.
That's the idea. And of course, we can't forget about sustainability.
Right.
The blueprint strongly advocates for a circular economy approach, promoting repairability, responsible recycling, and tackling that e-waste problem head-on.
So making sure this revolution doesn't come at the expense of the environment.
Exactly. And then there's that grand vision of the single digital market,
Yeah.
which requires harmonizing regulations, simplifying trade, and making it easier for skilled workers to move across borders.
That sounds so complicated. Where do you even begin?
Well, the blueprint suggests a phased approach, starting with pilot projects and regional collaborations. The idea is to demonstrate the benefits of integration and build momentum toward wider adoption.
Okay, so proving the concept and then scaling it up.
Exactly. And throughout all of this, there's this real focus on data. The blueprint recognizes that as more Africans come online, data becomes this incredibly valuable resource.
It's the new oil, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. But the blueprint is also really clear that this data has to be used ethically and responsibly. They call for clear guidelines for privacy, security, and ownership.
So making sure that Africans benefit from their own data.
Absolutely. It's also about building capacity in data science and artificial intelligence so that Africa can actually become a leader in the global data economy.
So data as a tool for empowerment.
Exactly.
Okay, we have the plan, we've got the players, we've got the goals, but let's be realistic. This is huge GE. Is it even feasible?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the blueprint, while optimistic, doesn't shy away from those challenges. They acknowledge that success requires sustained commitment, political will, and significant investment.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. But what's exciting is that we're already seeing progress. All across Africa, governments are implementing digital strategies, entrepreneurs are launching really innovative solutions, and communities are embracing technology to improve their lives.
So it's like this wave that's already building.
I agree. And if we can maintain that momentum, if we can learn from both our successes and our failures along the way, then yes, I believe that this vision of a digitally empowered Africa isn't just feasible, it's inevitable.
It's a future worth striving for.
It really is.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of smart devices in Africa. From the current landscape to the challenges and opportunities to that blueprint for a more inclusive future. Phew, it's been a lot. Thank you so much to our expert for guiding us through this complex and fascinating topic.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, we really encourage you to explore this topic more on your own. We've only just scratched the surface. We'll include a link to the full blueprint for inclusive adoption of smart devices in Africa in the show notes, so you can dive into their recommendations and their research.
Yeah, it's a roadmap for change.
And it's a journey worth taking. Until next time, keep diving.